This week on Inside the Headset, we are featuring St. Charles East High School assistant coach Brad McCaslin. In this episode, Coach McCaslin takes us on a deep dive into his coaching journey, highlights the importance of prioritizing athletes' mental health, and shares how he uses technology to better connect with his players. But first, a word from our sponsor. The Werner Ladder AFCA FBS Coach of the Year Award is the oldest award given by the American Football Coaches Association and embodies the nature of respect more than any other award in the game of football. Every coach who believes in the power of football to build better men knows the value of the game. Only a tiny minority of coaches can scale the heights to achieve true excellence. To make the climb, great coaches know they need help from a great team of players and assistant coaches. It's one of the primary reasons Werner Ladder signed on to sponsor the Werner Ladder AFCA FBS Coach of the Year Award in 2019. As a world leader in ladder manufacturing, Werner knows what it means to support a champion's climb to the top. Werner Ladder AFCA FBS Regional Coach of the Year voting is now open and runs through December 3rd. Active AFCA members should have received an email from the AFCA offices with voting instructions. Once the 5 FBS regional winners are selected, those are the 5 finalists for National Werner Ladder AFCA FBS Coach of the Year, and that voting starts in the middle of December and ends the week prior to the 100th Annual AFCA Convention in San Antonio, Texas. For questions regarding Coach of the Year voting, please feel free to contact Vince Thompson at vince@afca.com.
Coach McCaslin, thank you for joining us. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Coach Price. I appreciate getting the chance to visit with you.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm definitely loving the backdrops. We've seen some interesting backdrops on the podcast over the years, and this one looks nice and neat. I would have to think wife might be involved in that setup back there or something.
You're spot on. This is my wife's chair.
Oh yeah.
And so so this is where she works from home, and so this is her spot.
Oh yeah.
And she's out of town for the day, so I said, you know what? I'm going to change a few things out on the shelving behind there and make it a little bit more me. And but I said I'll take a picture of it and make sure it all looks good and proper when you get back.
Oh yeah. There you go. Well, hey, I just want to. Very interesting opportunity to sit and chat with you here today. You served in a variety of roles in several different places. Just give us an overview of your coaching career and what you love so much about this great profession that we're all about.
When you think about the profession or the game, like when I stopped playing high school football, I didn't know that I was I thought maybe I was done playing. I had no idea, right? I had no idea where this was going to go. And if you'd have told me then that my life was going to go in the direction it went, I would have never believed you, And in so many cases, that always has a lot to do with, a lot of different people, which, that's no different for me. But it does. It starts with the game. I said it gets inside of you. It takes you over. I grew up watching the Denver Broncos. I grew up in Cheyenne, Wyoming. The Mile High Stadium was 86.3 miles away, or at least that's the number I've used as my line for many years. I looked it up not long ago, and it was more like 103, but 86.3 sounds better. So,
yeah.
But I started watching the game, Craig Morton, Steve Watson, Tom Jackson. These are my heroes as a young boy playing for the Broncos. And we watched, we would watch we'd listen to the Wyoming Cowboys, my dad and I, every Saturday because he worked and I'd work with him. We'd listen to the game. And then on Sunday, we watched every Bronco game. And for years, I was, that was everything to me. It's the most important 2 days of the week were those two experiences. And, he would get, he owned his own business and he would get a card each summer, but prior to the football season, and have the Denver Broncos schedule on it. Right. And he'd go through that and he'd say, I see 11-5 or 12-4 or something like that. I look at that thing and think, my God, Dad, you're nuts. They're 16-0. There's not a game on here that they're going to lose, and as we all know, they were never 16-0, and right. He was always closer to the truth than I was. But I think that just it's just part of how I've approached this game, with all the possibilities in mind, all the, each season is a fresh slate, a clean slate and a start. And, so after I got done playing, I was a high school teacher and a coach in Omaha, Nebraska for Lonnie Tapp, and quickly understood that I kind of wanted to do I wanted to see what the college game was all about. I'd been a fan for so long, and I wanted to know more about, what it would take to get into that, started working the different connections and network that I had, wrote a lot of letters, right? Everybody does that. And got a lot of rejection letters, and a lot of people keep those. And I understand, the motivation for that. I kept them, I think, because I liked seeing my name in that letterhead, right? Like, I have such an appreciation for what this world that I still didn't fully understand was going to be. It was all positive, at that point. Even though I was getting told no, it was cool that my name was on the same letterhead as all these great institutions that I used to have. I cut out Sports Illustrated pictures every week and put them up on my wall of these great college players and places and programs. And, it's just something that's been with me from since being a little kid. And, so I think the game is such a part of that. I got an opportunity to be a GA, at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. This was 1997, right there where I was teaching. And that was with, some really, interesting people. Lance Leipold was a running backs coach, who's head coach at Kansas right now. DJ Vokalek was on that staff. He's a assistant head coach at Northern Iowa. Marvin Sanders has been a number of places. Bob DeZuris, Pat Burns was our head football coach, and in those 14 years that I was at UNO, which is a really crazy existence to be in one place. I went from a guy just barely out of college, to a husband and a father of three. And I mean, my life completely changed in that time. I was a graduate assistant when we started. And, at the end, I was a defensive coordinator, assistant head coach. I probably had every role and title along the way, within my side of the ball, as we went. And I think that was a significant impact in my development, as a coach over those years. But, 2011 was the year that they cut that program abruptly, right? So UNO no longer exists. Right. And, we had a new athletic director at the time. We were on a path to Division I as a program, FCS for football. We were in the same conversations with, North Dakota State. This was our league. The North Central Conference was North Dakota State, South Dakota State, South Dakota, North Dakota. But we were the only team, the only team that was in a metropolitan area, and we were in a state where no other team was making a similar move. And we had a donor, an alum, who had the means and was willing to be a major funder of that situation. And all of a sudden, the business model didn't make sense. And so it was a crazy situation. I won't get into all that kind of stuff, but we were out after a long haul. And 123 players on that roster at that time, staff. All had to find something else to do and somewhere else to go. Here's something interesting about that staff. So we had 4 graduate assistants, and 3 of the 4 were Sean Lewis, Zach Barton, and Matt Middleton. These guys are all. Sean Lewis is the head coach at Kent State. Right. Zach and Matt are with him there in significant roles, coaching and off the field as well. And I mean, they've turned that program around. Yeah. And they were our GAs on that roster, on that staff. Aaron Keene was our offensive coordinator. He's the head coach at Washington University right now, this weekend, if they win, they'll be in the postseason. He's in his first year as the head coach of his alma mater. And he was the special teams coordinator first, and then offensive coordinator at Eastern Michigan for their historic turnaround. He had a huge hand in how they've completely flipped that program around. Connor Riley was on that staff. He's the offensive line coach at K-State, and thought by many as one of the best at his position in the profession. And Taiwo Anatolu was also on that staff. He's at Kansas now, but he had a defensive end coach at Buffalo when they've set all kinds of pass rush records. And there's just a lot of names. A couple player names you might recognize. Shaquille Barrett was a freshman on that team when we got cut, and then he went on to do a lot of things, and still is with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
That's
and
right.
Greg Zerline was a junior for us. He's now down in your neck of the woods, down there kicking the ball for the Cowboys. So we had so much going on in that time. It was the most successful period of football in the 99-year history at UNO, and we had six conference championships in that stretch. And but there was a decision made for that to end. And so as we were talking before, I then went to Drake University, which is a terrific place for our family. Really neat program, cool conference, right? A lot of travel. And, but I had a unique challenge, probably one of the hardest challenges or first challenges I had from a coaching perspective, because I was the third defensive coordinator in 3 years in a successful program.
Yeah.
They just won a conference championship, and Tom Allen, who is their current head coach at Indiana, had been there for a season, and then Brian Ward, who's he's a defense coordinator at Nevada, he had been there for the season prior. So I was stepping in, and the condition of my hire was you have to run not your system, but a system that's going to fit these players that they've ran the last 2 years, which was not something I was accustomed to doing. So, that was a pretty difficult challenge, but we did it. We won a conference championship that year, beating San Diego. We were talking about how well they had been in that realm. We actually won that game and got a conference championship that year. So, after 2 years there, our head coach landed at Eastern Michigan. Eventually took me there as defensive coordinator, and those were that. You talk about a flip of for 16 years, winning seasons, strong belief in your program, everything about you is championship mentality, and we were then now in the the losingest program in FBS, for a significant period of time. We won 3 games there in those 2 years, and you talk about going from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Right.
That was a change, and but you could tell, we were just starting, but you could tell it was going to improve. It was going to get better. There was a lot of things that were improving. I personally had the opportunity to recruit Max Crosby, who's doing fantastic things in the NFL right now. He was a freshman my last year there, a redshirt freshman my last year there, and here's some advice I would just kind of pass on about a difficult situation like that, because we all find ourselves in that as coaches. But you have to stick to your guns. Like this will sound strange, but I was consistently trying to find a way to win a game. And so we were changing the dial and coming up with new things, and we were not laying enough of a foundation, or I was not laying enough of a foundation of what made me successful in the previous years. And so, when you keep kind of grasping for stuff to try to figure out a way to eke out a victory as opposed to looking for the long game, it was you start to lose some credibility. And that was a very difficult lesson for me to learn and go through. And so after 2 years, I was done there at Eastern, and then landed back with some fantastic people at University of Buffalo. Lance Leipold was back there in his second year in that program, so reuniting with him, and and a lot of really good people. A bunch of former Mavericks, UNO Mavericks, were on that staff at that time. Taiwo, who I mentioned to you, and a guy by the name of Chris Simpson and Scott Fuchs. Those guys were on the staff, plus a bunch of guys from Whitewater that have gone from Whitewater to Buffalo to Kansas with Lance. And that's just one of the things about our profession. It's so much about the people, right? And if you've got good people who are mutually committed and genuinely work and trust with each other, you can do big things. And that's one of the secrets that Lance has figured out. And one of the things that I was fortunate to see from UNO to Buffalo through the years is the benefit of people. And so I feel at this stage, Coach, I had one season as a head coach at Benedictine here in the Chicago area where I'm at right now. Now I'm coaching I spent this season coaching at St. Charles East High School, where my 2 boys are playing at. What a different perspective that is. And,
right.
I have a responsibility to this profession, because I've gained so much, learned so much, I've experienced so many different things, and and just what do I need to do to help make it better? Because it certainly is something that's had a significant impact in my life.
Absolutely. Well, that what a journey.
To
start off there with the UNO. I was coaching Division II at the time. Well, was it a Division II program as you were in it, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I was coaching Division II at the time when it got shut down, and it was running the table. It was a top class Division II program, and it got shut down. I never really knew the full story to that, and I sure didn't know all the staff that was currently there. But Division II football, you get the door shut in your face there. Non-scholarship FCS football over at Drake. You enter yourself into a program that's struggling, which I've been there at the FBS level, low budget, low fan support, all the kind of stuff that comes in some of those type of programs that are traditionally bad. I love the way you end that there as a lesson for you as personally as a coach. A lot of times you get thrown in those situations, and it's easy to blame the administration or the lack of financial support or whatever. But you just found a way to let that make you a better coach. And you go to Buffalo, you serve various roles there, and you get a head coaching job. And now you're coaching private school ball in the Chicago area. And so you have all these experiences, and one common thing, because there's not a lot of commonality between the different spots other than you're there to serve those student athletes. You're there to help their betterment. And this is something that you've shown passion about, regardless of where you've been, the success, the wins, the losses, whatever, you found ways to build strong relationships with those student athletes. Mental health and the well-being of the student athletes has been one of the things on the forefront for you. How have you seen coaches excel over your years or even fall short in that area when dealing with their athletes?
Yeah, that's a really important, topic. And here's, when you think about this, because, we played, and when we played, the tough ones thrived. Right? Like the dynamic of a player-coach relationship at its core is such a challenge to that, because players want to please their coaches. You're constantly encouraged to be strong, to be mentally strong, to be tough. And that's important, right? If you're going to grow as an athlete and stretch your limits, you've got to be put in stressful situations, and you've got to push through those. And so we all want players to be able to do that. And as coaches, we praise the players that do that, and they seek that praise, right? So think about that dynamic. But on the flip side, there's so much evidence, so much scientific evidence of the impact of stress, lack of sleep, your recovery, all of this, how it impacts performance, right? If you want to be your best from a performance perspective, you have to care about some of these other things. And over the last few years and more recently, I've been following a little bit of the work. It's John Underwood. He works right now with the Human Performance Project, and he's studied this for 30 years. It's not mind blowing what he's talking about. At its core, it makes perfect sense. You have to have proper rest and proper recovery, with nutrition and hydration, if you want your brain and your central nervous system to allow you to perform at your best. Like those things are directly connected, and that's the science behind it. So your ability as an athlete to move, to redirect, to react, to think, to control your body in the way, the premier ways that we want our elite athletes to be able to do things, that's all tied to your brain, tied to your central nervous system. And so, when you don't sleep well, okay, and or stress can come the chicken and the egg. When those two things occur in your life, you're impacting your brain, your central nervous system, and you're also impacting your ability to be your best. So what doesn't, there are a lot of coaches that's a little soft, right, to worry about the well-being. I mean, I'm not saying that coaches will ever admit that, but that they are in the profession. They want the toughness, they want the hard edge, they want that. But if you're not willing to deal with the overall well-being of the student athlete, you're not going to have an athlete that's going to perform at his best or her best for you, So here at the high school that I was coaching at this year, St. Charles East, we tracked our sleep as a program. And, we're constantly preaching it. We're, over the course of the season, we're having a lot of conversation about how important it is and what goes into it and how to structure it. And, the interesting thing is that we got considerably better at that. Our sleep hours, everything improved, but we never averaged as a program 8 hours of sleep, not once during the course of the season.
Wow.
So how do you, if you think about it, as much as we grew a lot, we never got to an average of 8 hours. We consistently had students that were sleeping 6 hours, 5 hours a night. And that's with us preaching it every single day, talking about how sleep and the importance of it, So, to me, if coaches aren't concerned about this kind of stuff, then you're not genuinely concerned about performance. You're not concerned about the success of your student athletes or being their best, because they go hand in hand.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
When did this become important to you? Really directly, I'm talking about the sleeping aspect. At what point in time in your career did it become important to you? And also, was there any point in your career in hindsight I'm kind of pinpoint maybe the Eastern Michigan stop if I was a guessing person, where you maybe became a little more disconnected from the well-being of the athlete. It was more just about performance. I know you're fighting for your job, you're fighting for a win. You said you're kind of grasping at straws a lot of time there. So kind of a two-headed question there. Once again, just the focus on sleep. When did that become important to you? And then did you ever find yourself struggling with these areas as a coach yourself?
Yeah, I think the sleep thing hit home, truthfully, more as my own kids were getting a little bit older.
Okay.
And they were athletes, and so that's when I started looking at it a little bit differently. Plus, the science was becoming more and more prominent. We had an excellent strength coach at the University of Nebraska Omaha. Okay, just Eric Hammer was an assistant strength coach at the time. David Noonan was the head strength coach. These two guys I think they were ahead of their game from a development standpoint, right? And so we were learning about some of the nutritional things. We had, it was 1999 and we had chocolate milk in the weight room, right? So, I mean, we were doing some things then that started that path of understanding there's more to it, right, than what I had previously understood, But you're right, when you start worrying about your job, or you start worrying about performance only, then there's a chance for that disconnect with the student athlete. But then I think for the coaches that consistently have to come back to that, you have to remind yourself, if you care about performance, if you care about them being their best on Saturday, then you have to look at that, their recovery, their sleep, their nutrition. You have to look at these things, and and then if you're disregarding those things, you're setting your own self up for failure. At places like Eastern, as you touched on, our strength and conditioning staff was excellent there too. And they had such a good hold on some of that stuff that us as coaches were maybe a little out of tune, or me, I'll just say me, was a little out of tune to some of that kind of stuff. And so then you go really narrow focused on the X's and O's and the job at hand and all this kind of stuff. And you lose track of the relationship, the genuine care for the student athlete, and what can you do to help them be a better performer as opposed to a better fitter in a defense, if you will. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, good question.
Yeah, and so I know we talked a little bit about sleep and that personal well-being, but another personal goal of yours is to kind of show the impact that football has on the awareness, understanding, and empathy as it relates to race and background. How did this goal become important to you, and how can coaches do this more effectively?
What's awesome about our game is that you don't really realize what's going on around you when you start in it, and you're coming together with a group of guys, and you become teammates, and and things just kind of start to naturally happen that you don't pay attention to. But one of the key things that happened to me that really shined a light on it was my first year at Buffalo. Alan Green was our athletic director at the time. He's now at Auburn, and he basically stopped training camp. We had a team meeting, all people in the program, not just players and coaches. It was everybody in the program, and he just wanted to have an open conversation about what was going on in our world. At that time, with the national anthem and with social injustice and where people stand. And man, we had, I sat in that room and I listened for probably an hour and a half. It was a very open and raw, honest conversation, all sides of it, from multiple people, student athletes predominantly, but Alan spoke and told some stories that blew me away about experiences, right? And so the two things that came from it: anytime you have a chance to sit in an open environment with an open mind, you learn, right? And that was very much a part of my personal experience with that. But it also just shined a big light on the impact that this game has on a group of guys, right? Like, if you've ever listened to Bill Curry, I'm sure you have, Coach Curry, talk about the power of the huddle, and and how it breaks down the separation of differences and that sort of thing. I mean, it's really that. Football has that power to do that. And I remember thinking here in the state of Illinois, when high school football wasn't being played 2 falls ago, I was thinking about that's an impact, because there's a lot going on socially in our country at that time, right? Especially close to the city of Chicago. There's a lot of things that are going on, and we don't have, hundreds of guys, and mostly guys and gals, but mostly guys in a locker room together, figuring out how to deal with each other and learning what comes from this great game, being together, fighting together, blood, sweat, and tears. To me, this is the greatest opportunity to teach it. We talk about all the life lessons. Well, this happens to be one of the greatest life lessons that comes from the game of football. Pat Burns, our head football coach at UNO, used to say this all the time. And you know how it is, like when you're growing up, your parents tell you stuff consistently, and then later on it makes more sense. Well, with Coach Burns, he talked a lot about, he said, mutual respect is what will make us a program, will make us a team. And it took a long time for that to really soak in. That's a heavy 2 words, mutual respect, right? But that at its core is what allows football teams to go out there, regardless of background or regardless of, all the differences that we come together with, and act as one, right? No other sport other than soccer puts 11 people in the same direction and the same goal and the same mindset. And if you all do it together at the right time, good things happen, and you got to count on each other, right? So, these are the things that we all know about the game. But I've always felt like it was probably an accident and a fortunate accident that I became really open to a lot of different things because of this. And then I started seeing a bigger picture in terms of its power and its impact and how much, seriously, think about this, Coach. If groups of people could get together like we do in football consistently and having those open conversations, think about all the different things that could be solved and fixed or improved in our country. But that doesn't happen very often. We can't get people together to behave like a football team does on a consistent basis.
Yeah, you said an important phrase there is mutual respect. And that's one of the awesome things about football. You have that mutual respect from each other because, hey, I'm a running back, you're my right guard. You protect me, I respect your job. And then when you have that mutual respect, those conversations become a lot easier to have. Because you do have a little bit skin in the game with that person prior to that conversation. Whereas, like you said, with society, we can't just do that because I don't know you from Adam, so I'm not really caring about your opinion. And that is the beauty of the game. And I loved hearing some of the stories. I know it was a little difficult, like you said, in Chicago and many of the states, not in Chicago, but in Illinois and many of the states during this COVID deal where they just weren't playing high school football. But some of the college guys we had get on a podcast, they start talking about some of these difficult conversations that were kind of arising with what was going on in the world, and just watching their team, their players be emotional, put themselves out there, talk about their personal issues and how they view different things, and just that how much stronger of a team that made them. It was really cool to see those coaches give the kids the opportunity, and that's amazing. And 2015ish, 2014ish, you say the AD comes out and puts a halt to practice. This is well before the COVID times. Obviously, that's awesome that he gave those young people a platform to not just bang heads and catch balls. Just to talk about things that do affect our society. Now, I do want to shift gears right here.
Sure.
You get around recruiting, you get around draft time. Every time you open up a social media channel during those 2 times, signing day and NFL draft, you always see the same meme, and it's important now, and it's always important, but it's always, this is, Mario Price, and he's a multi-sport athlete. That is always a buzz term whenever you start talking about athletes. And you got 3 children who were or are currently multi-sport athletes, and you've seen firsthand the unique challenges, as many of us have, that they go through. Just with your mindset on well-being and all the things we previously discussed, how can we improve upon the experience for multi-sport athletes?
One of the things I think that has to happen is the club environment there needs to be a pushback from the high school environments, if you will, because the club environment has too strong of a hold on things. And so, my daughter, who's a sophomore playing at Mississippi State. She's a soccer player at Mississippi State. She was a multi-sport athlete. She tried all the different sports. She loved basketball and she loved soccer, and those two butted heads all the time. And so we fought for her because she wanted it. We fought for her to be a high school student athlete in those 2 sports, right? So that was the most important thing. Represent your team and your community in those 2 sports. And we, you go to an SEC school in soccer if you're not a club athlete, right? So you have to do those things. But what happens is the club environment becomes a really cutthroat and very narrowly focused individual. They're not focused on what's best for the student athlete, So a very, very quick story, but we would go from basketball practice, finish that, get in the car, drive an hour to go to club soccer. And so she'd cool down. She would have to eat, probably a Jimmy John sandwich or something, fast, going up there, cool down, then practice for 2 hours, then drive an hour back, and you're getting home at 10:30. How's that on rest? How is that on nutrition, recovery, cool down and running back and trying to be your best again in that situation? It was brutal. And she suffered some injuries, because that is something that occurs significantly to those that are so guarded about their sport. If you don't have, if you don't have the total student athlete in mind. And, each sport wants the best. They have standards, and I fully respect that. You just can't lose sight of the total athlete. And one of the things that I'm trying to be a voice for right now, and I'm not a exercise science, strength and conditioning. I have no dog in the fight, but I think every high school should have a strength and conditioning coach in the building. And I think that person, would be the advocate of the student athlete and be the one that, another real world situation. My youngest is a thrower in track. So he does his football workout in the off season, like it's expected to do. And then track practice starts, and they're in the weight room and they're benching. And he's like, "Well, coach, I just benched with football earlier today." "Well, just do it again." Yeah. Like, that's ridiculous. There is no intelligence in that whatsoever. And I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just saying what it is. Like, you cannot develop a young athlete in that way. And so why do athletes get hurt? Why do athletes lose interest? Why do athletes not, go and give their best when they get that in their mind? How do you trust that? Right. So, I just think that there needs to be an advocate in the building that's like an athletic trainer, that's for the student athlete, not for the basketball player, not for the football player, not for, is just for that student athlete, and helping them with all the things that we talked about from a development standpoint, from a recovery standpoint, and, from a mobility standpoint, things of that nature. They're going to reduce injuries and promote health and success. So, yeah, I mean, I think that, again, the value of sports, the value of team, the value of all of that, I'm a very biased, one-sided individual when it comes to that. But there still has to be some right ways we do it. More is not always best.
Absolutely.
Right. And so we've got to find ways to put reasonable limits on these guys, to let them and gals to have their day off, to have their downtime, to have their balance between things, but yet still have the experience of being taught and coached by multiple perspectives, multiple sports, multiple skills, learn how to win different ways. If they're going to be at that next level, right, then this is the best path to do so.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've been engulfed in football, obviously, for the last, it seems like forever, but 20 years or so. And I kind of lost sight on the select leagues and their impact on these young people. And as I stepped away from, actually actively coaching football and took this role at the AFC, I was missing some of those relationships and having a whistle around my neck. So I do some personal training and hanging out at a local gym here. And the place I work at, we end up getting pretty tight with the local high school baseball team. And I don't know much about baseball. I played my freshman year. That was my last time playing. And I talked to this one kid, and he says, "Yeah, I'm signing on Wednesday. I'm signing to a Division I school or whatever." And I was like, "I thought you don't even play for the high school. You're like you're not a starter." He's like, "Oh yeah, man, the recruiting is in select leagues." Yeah, and so I'm in a select league, and I run into another kid, and he, we're in Waco, and he's driving to Houston 2 times a week to go play go play baseball, which is a 3-hour hike, and it was like, wow. And I know the 7-on-7 is starting to eke its way and being the quote unquote select deal for football. And I know a ton of athletes aren't really leaning towards that, but it is gaining in popularity. And I would just hate to see it step away from the high school, and because the high school coaches play such an important role, that experience, that community, everything you mentioned. But anyways, I'm experiencing this firsthand. Is just mind blowing. The young ladies in volleyball and soccer, every other sport besides football is really the recruiting process has stepped away from the high school for the most part. So But switching gears here, since you got a little bit more time on your hands, not being a head coach coordinator for Division I university, you had the opportunity to launch a unique tool for coaches across the country, and it's called XA Score. This app seeks to improve several of the challenges faced by athletes that you are passionate about. Some of the things we hit on throughout the course of this podcast. Tell us a little bit about the app, the impact you've seen it have on coaches, players, and programs across those that are using it.
Yeah, it's been cool. It didn't start as trying to create something for a platform or a product or anything. Honestly, it was when I stepped away at UB. I was still connected with the staff, and I was helping in some different ways. I was doing some work, from home a little bit, and I was, involved in staff communications, and I was watching issues with my guys, my players, the defensive tackles that I was coaching, not being where they were supposed to be when they were supposed to be there. And I was like, I felt responsible, right? And so I'm like, how do I help that situation? What can I do? And so, that's one of the things that through my career is just I've looked at. We've got to find a better way to be able to operate as a program. When we were at UNO, we were one of the first teams to use digital video. We were doing some things with digital as a developmental partner with digital video back at a time when only a handful of NFL teams were actually using it. So I've seen the benefit of using a real working environment to grow something that can have a significant impact. And so, so what happened is, one thing kind of led to another. I started pulling some different ideas from even my past of different things to maybe make this be a little bit more concrete. I connected with some really smart people because this is not my world, right? And I've told them since day one, I'm a football coach, but I need some technical understanding of what's going on here. And we build a platform. In that world, it's called an MVP, a minimal viable product. And then we surpassed the expectations of that, and we grew it into a phase 2. And honestly, it has a couple of key components. The first one, we were, as I mentioned, trying to fix a problem. We're driving discipline. So, we started trying to solve the problem of just attendance. Is everybody here, and are they on time, and who is missing? And so we found a way to turn, that's a pain every single day, and especially in a football program with over 100 players. Yeah. So we flipped that pain point, and now it drives discipline because we're scoring how well people are on time. And it's easy. It's quick. They click, and they're in, and now they get a score, that score for the day. They've got a 30-day score. We know how well each individual, each team, each position is at being on time, which being on time is a key component of how strong your culture is in your program. People being where they're supposed to be on time is a key point to that. So the second thing, though, that we did is we were using body weight as the indicator of where they, once they weighed in, then they were reported, right? So we're tracking body weight, which immediately in our first test program was saved them, 3 to 4 hours a week of tracking time. Nobody was writing it down. Nobody was inputting it later. It was an automatic, input into the system, into our system and to their system. And then, once you start tracking that body weight and using we have a detailed algorithm for scoring, you can start to drive discipline tied around body weight. So if you've got guys that you need to gain weight or lose weight or maintain, we're scoring off of that progress as well. So not just being on time, but also achieving your goal of body weight gives you scores in each of those areas, and then those aggregate to a one single score of how you are in this program. What are you at today? Where do you truly stand in terms of being on time and in terms of being disciplined with your body weight? Here's the crazy thing. That was the first 2 goals. And so we unlocked something in which had become our biggest impact, kind of unknowingly. So we wanted to capture a little bit or try to determine a little bit of the readiness of the student athlete. So we ask a couple of questions when they check in, takes them less than 10 seconds. It's very easy. But we started getting feedback from the athletes that you could, if you were tracking it and paying attention, and then we developed some systems around that, now coaches are getting a real-time list of who's struggling a little bit. Who do they need to go talk to? So you got 100 guys walking in the building, check it in a football program, and all of a sudden now you got 3 or 4 guys that aren't feeling the best, and now you can go have a one-on-one conversation with that. So what happened is we were accidentally, however you want to say it, we were creating conversations within the football program.
Yeah.
We're improving connection. We're building trust. Some of these things that were happening with student athletes were small. They're simple little things that, with a class or with someone, a roommate or something like that. But some were not. Some were significant. And it's hard. I'm telling you, it's hard for a student athlete to come knock on your door as a coach and say, hey, I'm struggling with something.
Yeah.
But when all they have to do is just push a little button kind of quietly to themselves and raise their hand and say, I got something going on, and now the coach comes to you, it's just a really easy mechanism to get the help that you need. And so what was meant to save time and drive discipline really became a component of like developing genuine connection within a football program, which is at its core of so many of the things that I believe in and wished I would have done better at different times of my life as a coach,
right.
Regretting at times. And now I see a way that I can help other coaches do that, and we've been working on this for 2 years. We've launched, we've got football programs from Power 5 to, NAI high school. And we've now started to get into some other sports faster than we ever thought we would. We've got a volleyball team, basketball, soccer, lacrosse, swimming, diving. We've got a number of other sports that are using different components of this,
right.
But it is that readiness. That's that daily check-in that's everyone wants. That is a part of what we're doing. Some don't necessarily want to track the body weight in the same way. Some don't want to track the on time in the same way, but everybody wants to know how their guys are doing or how their gals are doing. So It's been awesome. It's been really cool. And we're kind of just starting to really gain some traction within and make it available, coast to coast. And we for the last 4 months, we've been doing that, and it's been a really cool thing. So
I tell you what I really like about that, upon hearing that is, and you can respect this just with your, background coaching at the different levels. When you're coaching at that collegiate level, you do have that 30-minute meeting, running back meeting, wide receiver meeting, linebacker, safety meeting, whatever you were on defense. You kind of had the opportunity to sit down with your guys and, you take the first couple minutes, at least I did. You kind of shouted back and forth with the guys, and that, it was fun, but you also got to get a beat. Oh, he's having a bad day. I gotta hold him after, see what's going on. Devontae, he's looking down. Him and his girlfriend doing all right. His mom, okay. And I had the opportunity to coach high school football here in Texas, and it was a little bit more hands-on with the athlete. And as I recruited in Mississippi and Ohio, and that teacher was also the full-time math teacher, or that coach was also the full-time math coach, and they didn't have the athletic period. Some of these interaction opportunities to check in on those athletes become hard, but with this, it becomes, like you said, very quick, very easy. You're able to kind of have those conversations with those athletes in a time right now, and I don't think it's ever really changed. So saying right now might be inaccurate, but these young people, they need us, and like you said, it's hard for them sometimes to maybe speak up, but this makes it extremely easy. And the coolest part about all this is just 1/3 of it. What the app does. This is a small part of it, but in my opinion, a very important part of it.
Yeah, it really has. And to, we had a situation in one of our earlier programs where they were using the app from home because the coach, it was Christmas break. He wanted the players to check in. He was getting a wait, once a week and having them check in on how they're doing. And it was kind of an easy way to stay in tune with his athletes, his entire program. And, one of the student athletes had checked in with a low feeling score. The position coach picked up the phone, called, checked in. It wasn't COVID. It wasn't sickness. It was rough. He was in a bad spot.
Yeah.
And so that athlete, they got him connected with a trainer and then with professional help like that immediely. And it's all worked out. It's all gone in a good direction. Right. And if we had a hand in that, awesome. But we've all heard, like, how many times we heard the story where people are going, we had no idea. We had no idea.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's hard. There's not a lot of mechanisms in place for that student athlete to reach out.
Right.
And what we found was the players they want to tell you how they're doing.
Right.
It's just hard to do it. We found a way to make that easy.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do it in one way. I'm not going to divulge all the secrets, but there's different ways that the information comes out, not just in one dynamic, because a player could say, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
Right. They just always answer it. But there's a couple of different ways that a coach can get insight and still pull that athlete aside and say, hey, I noticed this. You say you're good, but I still noticed this about what's going on. How can, what's going on with you? Right. And 9 times out of 10, a student athlete, when asked that question, isn't going to go, no, coach, I'm good. Like, when you look in their eyes, if you're doing your job and you're building trust and you look in their eyes and you ask them, man, what's going on? They're going to tell you.
Yep.
Okay. If you care and they know, they're going to tell you.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're doing this for. That's what all this is for. So,
Coach, well, it's about time for us to wrap it up, man. We sure appreciate, number one, just your long line of experience, and hopefully some of your experiences can help other coaches, and then also appreciate what you're doing with the XA score. I think this is an awesome tool for coaches to take advantage of in relation to their student athletes and building great relationships, tracking them, and all that good stuff. So before you head off, love for you to drop your social media for both yourself and XA score. So if coaches are interested in keeping up with your journey and also keeping up with XA score, they can do so.
Well, so, XA score is at X, the letter A, that's extra assistant score. Okay. And I've got that on all social media. And it's also, the website is xascore.coach, www.xascore.coach. My personal handle, you got me on that one. I gotta grab my phone and even look and see what it is, because, Twitter is the best way to reach me. And man, I like connecting with coaches. I've had a lot of really cool conversations through direct message, and then have led to other things, as a mentor and whatnot. So, I'm very willing to have conversations, whether they are for us or not. So, but that's at Coach B McCaslin. So at Coach B McCaslin on Twitter, and hit me up, and, whatever I can do to help. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the AFCA. Long-time supporter and obviously member, and love what you guys are doing, and having this opportunity, and you, Coach, getting a chance to meet you and have this conversation. So hopefully there's something here that will strike a chord.
Always, Coach. There's always somebody out there that needs it. I appreciate you, man. We'll make sure to link those Twitter accounts and website in our show notes, so make it easy for coaches to find you.
Sure.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset. If you heard anything on this episode that you would like to learn more information about, head over to afcapodcast.com, where you can find every episode and all of the corresponding show notes. While you're there, take a second to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for the show, please let us know by sending an email to podcast@afca.com. Make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Inside the Headset, and tag it when you share each episode. You can stay up to date with all things AFCA by following the @WeAreAFCA Twitter account. Every episode of Inside the Headset can also be found on your favorite audio streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you are not currently a member of the AFCA, be sure to find us online at afca.com and apply to join over 10,000 NFL, college, and high school coaches from around the country who are striving to be the best they can be. With an AFCA membership, you gain invaluable access to the annual AFCA convention, the bi-monthly magazine, and the new and improved digital library, which contains thousands of videos and articles contributed by hundreds of current and former football coaches. You can also visit afcainsider.com to sign up for our free weekly email newsletter on the right-hand side of the screen. It comes out every Tuesday at lunch and is filled with great articles and stories written by many of the same coaches you hear on the podcast. It's geared to help you become a better coach tomorrow than you are today. Be sure to connect with me on Twitter at Coach Mario Price. And remember, the AFCA is not just an annual convention. It is an association that continually promotes education, guidance, and networking. But it is also so much more than that. The AFCA is about celebrating the past and educating the future. It is about developing great coaches who will produce great teams and even better people. So invest in your skill set and impact today by engaging with the AFCA.